Mina, let's kick off by talking about Iran. What is Hassan Rouhani hoping to achieve here? Because we've got him glad-handing all over Europe, desperately trying to save this nuclear deal. But what really happens next? Because threatening to shut the Strait of Hormuz, while it does raise tensions, I mean, this isn't necessarily something that the Iranians can actually accomplish.
I mean, they'd have to go to full-blown out war in order to try to accomplish it. And I think it's very clear that everything from the American Navy to regional powers would stop that from happening. And I don't think they actually think they would go ahead and do that, but it's their way of saying that, you know, we do have cards to play. Clearly, he went to Europe thinking this is going to be a trip where he can tell the Europeans, who are actually quite sympathetic to the Iranians, that's been clear in their statements, and say to them, you want to trade with us, we can work out ways, you know, whether it's trade in the euro, trying to get around US sanctions. But at the end of the day, when you compare Europe's trading relationship with the US and the importance of dealing with the dollar market and the Iranian share of the market, it's a losing argument in that sense. On top of it, when Rouhani got there was this plot that is still unraveling in terms of the targeting of opposition rally in Paris. So that kind of cast a whole other shadow on Rouhani's trip. And Rouhani's been very careful to say that I am the president, I am the moderates, and so forth. But of course, increasingly, we're seeing the impact of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and the militarization of Iran coming into the fore. And this happens in Europe. Then, of course, when he threatens that there are cards that they can play regarding the Strait of Hormuz, you straight away have the commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, Qasem Soleimani, issuing this very public letter and saying, yes, you know, we support this, we would do this. And so it's not even a carrot and stick scenario. It's almost saying that we want this to work, but we're also ready to be belligerent, which I don't think is going to work. That sort of gambit with the Europeans is not going to end up working.
Shri, you want to weigh in here?
Thank you, Hadley. Mina, in many ways, it seems that Rouhani is fighting for his political survival. Just how vulnerable and tenable is his position?
He is absolutely vulnerable because he played the nuclear deal as his personal achievement. Of course, that and his Foreign Minister Jawad Zarif. There are those within the Iranian regime, especially the more extreme conservative elements that have always been against that. And so they're saying to him, actually, your public face and public persona of trying to work with the Europeans, work with the international community have failed. And of course, we've seen protests in Iran at different times, and the protests are all pegged to the economy. The theory had been that with the nuclear deal, Iran's economy improves, people start to see improvement on the ground. But they didn't. And they didn't see improvement even before American sanctions kicked in. That's the point, that even though this Iran deal was at the beginning honored and there was some sanction relief, on the ground, inflation didn't improve, people's general lives didn't improve because, again, there are lots of questions about how that sanction relief was initially used by the Iranian regime.
And Mina, finally, you know, one of the big questions, of course, here, we've seen the Tadal performing slightly better at the close yesterday. Obviously, Saudi Arabia, a lot of excitement about that MSCI emerging market inclusion just a couple of weeks ago. Certainly excitement surrounding what's happening in the society as well. But there have been reports that there have been some pushback when it comes to women's driving. And we're seeing a lot of tweets over the last 24 hours about one woman in Mecca and how she said that her car had been set on fire. Yeah. How do you think that this is playing out? Because obviously lots of great media press buzz surrounding it. But at the end of the day, folks having to deal with the harsh realities that not everyone agrees with what's happening there.
Right. I mean, I think you can't deny that there are instances of those who are against the women driving. And again, this is something that's been going on for decades, and so to change it overnight will take time. But the general atmosphere is positive, and generally people are for it. And so I think, yes, you have jibes on social media, you have some negative remarks, but in whole, it's more positive. That's in terms of the women's driving, but also that this is one step in a really long process. Even though it's a speedy process, as we're seeing happening in Saudi Arabia, it's still a process. So I think the jury's out in terms of how the impacts will be on society in the long term.
Hey everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.